Welcome back. Well, today I am joined by Ronnie Andrews, who is the president and CEO of Oncocyte. And we had him on our Your Health program, but he's here to tell us a little bit more about some of the testing that's going on. Ronnie, thank you for joining us again.
Lisa, thanks for having me again.
You know, you are a wealth of information, as I told you last time. And this time I wanted to have you on our This Day program, so we can really keep up to date what's going on in the testing arena. So since the last time that I talked to you, which has been about 2 months, can you sort of tell us where we're at with some of our testing right now?
Sure, let me give you an update. I mean, we've had, as you might imagine, a tsunami of companies diving into this, and you can probably see an announcement every day of a new emergency use authorization by the FDA of somebody that's releasing a test. And so if you remember from the last discussion when we were together, there's two types of tests. There's the PCR test, which looks at the direct virus in your nasal passages or in your throat, and that is for active disease. And then there's the antibody test, or sometimes called serological testing, which actually looks at to see if your body's created immunity against the virus, and that test is typically run in blood. It's a blood sample. And so what's happened is, since you and I met last time, we've had a plethora of folks join in. We now have over 188 companies with emergency use authorization for an antibody test, which is very interesting. I can explain why in a second. And we have 87 companies with emergency use authorization for a PCR test, or the direct virus test that tells you if you have active disease. Interestingly enough, though, of all those, there's only 8 companies that have a PCR or a test for the direct virus that have been through the final FDA work that they needed to prove sensitivity and specificity, which is really important for your listeners to understand. And those are the tests that are typically now deployed in most of the large reference labs around the United States. And those tests are from companies like Abbott, Roche, Thermo Fisher, et cetera, QIAGEN, and some well-known diagnostic companies. They do this for a living, and they have gotten their products through the FDA and are actually in labs doing this testing today.
Right.
On the antibody test side, there's 188 companies, as I said, but only 14 of those companies have actually been through the FDA process, so we can actually trust those results from the blood test to see if the patients developed antibodies. And so real important, because you see all kinds of media news about this and that, and it's important to note that unless those antibody tests are being run in one of these, I would say FDA blessed, on one of these FDA blessed tests, it's really challenging to know whether they're accurate or not. And most of the rapid tests, unfortunately, which is what we had hoped to have by now, just aren't there in terms of their ability, sensitivity and specificity wise, to actually tell someone, have I really had the disease or not? So let me pause there, but we've had a lot happen since March, and that's great. The science community and the diagnostic community can really come in big, but it's still important to sort out sort of what's real and what's Memorex.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I did have a friend of mine who went early on to get testing thinking that she was getting the COVID-19 test. However, they gave her a blood test. Now, if somebody's had a blood test, that's not the correct test.
Yeah, no, if you're looking for active disease, that's still, unfortunately, the deep nasal swab that you see at the testing facilities around Orange County. And now some tests are coming out with a saliva claim, which will be much easier, so you can just get a swab of your throat. The nasal swab, unless it's done correctly, it can still give false results. And so it's really important that you get that from a healthcare professional. If they have to, one of my buddies, he just got it related to almost getting brain surgery. They had to go way up in there, and they do have to swab deep into the nasal passages to make sure they get enough access to virus so that you can create a result that's accurate.
Yes, I did hear it is actually not a pleasant thing to have happen. But what's worse? There could be worse.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, there has been a delay in testing. I know you addressed that a little bit in regards to now we're up to a 5-day lag time. So what actually caused that? Was it data, or was it the actual lag time from the labs?
Well, way back in when we met first time, the diagnostics world was not quite prepared for the rapid onset of this virus. And we can talk about, there's all kinds of postulation as to why that happened. The fact is, once the U.S. diagnostics world got on this, they got on it big, as evidenced by the number of companies that now have tests. So, and the challenge we had in the beginning was just getting the test deployed in these large reference labs, getting enough kits on the market. Today, though, I can tell you one of the largest manufacturers of those kits, who you know well, Thermo Fisher Scientific, you know, they're up way up above 5 million tests a month. And so if you combine that with all the other manufacturers, we have plenty of capacity. The challenge is in the shipping and then the actual accessioning and then running these, the instrument capacity typically is limited on a daily basis. And so what you're seeing is, just because of the spike, you're seeing a rapid onset of more people wanting to be tested. You know, I called around for our interview today, and it looks like the average wait time in Orange County, depending on where you go to get tested, is somewhere between 5 and 7 days. Most places are less than 5 days today. I did see a report, you probably saw the same thing and made some inquiries about it, that there was a 12, 15-day lag time in certain areas. And come to find out, that was not the testing lag. That was actually the portal by which they deliver the results had some type of glitch in it, and they lost a bunch of results, had to go back and recover them. But all in all, if one of your viewers wants to go get tested today, and it'll be about 3 to 5 days on average before they'll get those results back. And obviously, if you think you've been exposed and that wait time is that long, you need to take precautions and not be around people that you know are vulnerable. I mean, this is still a disease of the vulnerable, unfortunately, and it's disproportionately affecting elderly people that have comorbidities, even here in Orange County. That's the large percentage of unfortunate deaths are around, you know, people that are older and have comorbidities. And so healthy young people just aren't getting sick, and they're not going to the hospital, but infecting a lot of people. So if you think you've been exposed, it's important, get the test, wait the period, and then when you know you're negative, you can get back out and do your activities.
Right. Well, definitely good advice. In fact, Laguna Woods Village as a whole, not necessarily in the village, has done a really good job. I mean, they've stayed in, they've worn their masks, they do the distancing, and we've been able to keep our numbers very low. I think the last time we checked was, you know, somewhere in the mid 30s. So, I mean, we have been able to keep it at a very low number.
Yeah, I pulled the numbers, and as compared to other areas in Orange County, especially compared to North Orange County or even Irvine, very low numbers. And so I would just say, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. It's
Yeah,
working.
exactly. Now, you know, the numbers, as you mentioned, we are seeing a little bit of a drop off. But before I get into why you think that is, I'd like to know about some of the vaccines that we have been hearing so much about in the media. I mean, obviously, there's so much information. It's really hard for all of us layman folks to really understand it. So if you could sort of dissect that a little bit and spell it out for us in layman's term, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And just, you know, I don't want to get too scientific here, but let me just lay it out there that that we have a very unique opportunity now with over 250 vaccines in play. When we were together in March, I had done as much research as I could, and you asked me a question, and I kind of guessed. I thought there'd be maybe 100 companies or 100 targets that we would go after. Well, there's over 250. And the interesting thing is we have really 3 approaches that seem to be working. You've all heard of Moderna and their messenger RNA, synthetic messenger RNA vaccine. It did very well in its phase 1 safety trials. They only had 1 class 3 event, and that was just really redness around the infection site. So to have only 1 in a new vaccine like that is very unique. But that's the first time we've really tried this approach in what I would call a vaccine against a flu type or a coronavirus. The ones that seem to be working most are the ones where they take attenuated pieces of the virus itself and they inject, and then they get the immune response around that, and they get antibodies built up. And that way, when you get exposed, your body builds back. So out of 250 in play, we have 6 now in phase 3 clinical trials. That's very exciting, actually. I know you can hear the media talk about it all day long, but the rapid path that we're on may not lead to anything. But I would bet, if I were a betting man, I'd bet by late November we have at least something that can help the high risk patients, so that we go into the flu season without any hopefully with protection for the high risk patients. And I do believe that the Pfizer application is doing well, and I've seen some of the early phase 3 data. It looks very good. And so by wintertime, it's very plausible that we'll have a couple of vaccines. And, you know, I get asked all the time, will you take the vaccine? And my answer is this: look, I want to save it for people that are high risk. I happen to be very blessed with good health. And you know, I know that healthy people with no comorbidities have today, right now, at my age, I have a 0.174% chance of, if I got it, going to the hospital. So I'm very unlikely that it'll really impact me personally. So we want to make sure those vaccines get to the vulnerable and protect them. And so I do think there's exciting news out of the vaccine world. I'm more bullish than a lot of people around that, because most people have been around watching vaccines over time, and they take forever. But we're in a new era. Remember, when we did the H1N1 virus back in the swine flu years in 2009, it took us almost 2 months to sequence the virus itself. Today, we sequence it in a day. And
Wow.
so the speed at which we can look and iterate different things against these viruses has increased thousandfold. So I have a lot of confidence in the world that as a science world that we live in, and I do believe that we'll see success out of this, and hopefully by the wintertime.
Well, that's good news, most definitely. And it seems like that is the target, is around, fall, winter time, which is, like you said, flu season as well. So hopefully we
Right.
will have something by then. And then just lastly, real quick, let's talk a little bit about some of the current numbers that we're seeing. We are seeing a fall as a nation. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, we're seeing, you know, the numbers for the nation are pretty right now. There's been a recent spike, as you know, across the country. It looks like, I just looked at the data yesterday from the CDC, and then looked at Johns Hopkins and a couple of the other websites that track this. It looks like in all the hot spots that the spike has now turned the other way. We're seeing a decrease across almost every state, including California, in the number of daily samples. And I think, you know, I'm sure most of your viewers follow the Orange County data, but the Orange County data is really pretty, I think, you know, encouraging. We've got today we've you know, been testing and have tested about 14% of the population. Right now we've had about 38,000 positive cases, but right now in hospitals across Orange County, we have about 555 people in the hospital. We have plenty of capacity in the hospitals themselves. And the ICU bed utilization, which, keep in mind, ICU utilization is typically in the 55 to 65% anyway without a viral pandemic. And today we've got about 35% capacity left. So it looks like we're in a good place from ICU beds, and the number of people in ICU are declining over the last 7 days. And if you look at the rolling 7-day averages, Lisa, for the number of cases, positive cases in Orange County, the high that we saw in the spike was 993 cases on June 30th. And yesterday we had 403 cases. So you can see almost a 50% reduction in daily cases. So it does look like the spike is turning. And that is good news for all of us, and especially given the fact that our healthcare workers have done a phenomenal job of triaging patients and only keeping the very sick in ICU beds and moving the rest to you know, normal beds. And you might imagine we're seeing less deaths, way less deaths. And the reason is, and in speaking with some of my friends that run the emergency rooms around the county, our knowledge of how to treat these patients has increased significantly. We know now ventilator is a last resort. Don't lay them on their back. Try to get people up, put them on the inversion beds. Watch for thrombosis. What we didn't know in the early days is this virus has a really unique capacity to embed itself in the capillary bed epithelial tissue and create small blood clots, and they get to your lung, and we have pulmonary thromboses. And so they're putting people on blood thinners out of the gate now, and just all those things are helping us just get better prepared. And so again, I'm always the glass is half full guy, but I think we're coming to a point where it's manageable, and I think the spike going down will continue.
Encouraging news. I knew you were the right guy to talk to.
Like I said, the glass is half full, but I do want to say, and you know this, the healthcare community here is incredible. And the response to this in Orange County is impressive. I have friends all across the country, and they always call me and say, what's going on there? You guys are really, because we really have beat the national averages across the board in almost every way. And so congrats to the community for taking this seriously, wearing their mask, doing the things they can. And I think that, hopefully the vaccine this fall this thing will be it'll always be with us, it looks like, but it'll be more like the H1N1 flu every year than it's going to be a deadly pandemic for forever. So there's hope, and we just have to stay what we're doing until the vaccine's here. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time as always.
Well, thank you for having me.
And we'll be right back after this.